Alrighty, good morning and happy Wednesday to everybody out there. It may not be so happy of a Wednesday when you hear the news, though, that we have an upgrade in the severe weather risk across parts of the Mississippi Valley stretching up into the Ohio Valley for the outbreak expected today. That was at least expected as of last night, according to me anyway, to produce damaging winds and hail. The tornado threat has been on the conditional side of things, but it does look like that tornado threat is on the way up, and the intense tornado potential, the possibility of tornadoes upwards of EF3 or greater, that is going to exist in a few storms as you come out of places like Arkansas, getting on up there through a place like far western Tennessee in the Memphis region, also getting on up there to far southeast Missouri, and yes, we could see that on up towards a place like Paducah, Kentucky as well. So we're watching a pretty localized area for that highest tornado potential today, but keep in mind on my ONW severe scale here, my custom severe weather risk graphic, I have a level 5 of 7 for severe weather now extending all the way up to the Ohio Valley, where I think there's enough confidence in some guidance anyway, for there to be that conditional threat for a couple of strong or maybe even intense tornadoes up there with any supercells that run ahead of main lines of storms today. A general level 4 of 7 for at least scattered severe weather, including that tornado potential, exists from northeast Texas all the way up to southern Michigan and points in between. And we have a yellow zone for level 3 of 7 risk and a dark green zone for the level 2 of 7 risk, which still we could have isolated tornadoes, isolated scattered severe weather in those zones, so you need to be alert as we go through the day today. Now, as of the time that I'm doing this live stream, I do want to briefly show you that we have ongoing this morning. Obviously, if you're tuning into this after, then this will probably be moving off to the east, but we do have a tornado warning as at the time of this live stream just northeast of Butler, Missouri, so make sure you are getting to your safe spot there. As of 7:15 a.m. Central Time this morning, we have severe thunderstorm warnings all the way back down to Tulsa and Ada in Oklahoma. And it's this activity that's expected to become very concerning as we go deeper through the day today. And let's go ahead and talk about some of the ingredients that are going to get together and possibly produce that more intense tornado outbreak than initially expected by the time we go into this afternoon and evening. Looking first of all here at the jet stream 15 to 20,000 feet on up into the atmosphere. This is your mid-level jet, also called your 500 millibar jet stream. We're looking at it with the European model, and you can really see here a intense trough or a piece of jet stream energy really cutting up all the way from the southwest U.S. and then curling from the southwest to the northeast as it makes its way from places like New Mexico and Texas all the way up into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region. You also have some additional energy kind of coming into that trough here along its leading edge, and that's going to be crossing over anywhere from Texas and Louisiana up here into parts of Arkansas. And a lot of those zones that I was showing have highlighted for the highest risk for severe weather as we go through the day today. These winds, again, keep in mind they're kind of cutting in from the southwest to the northeast like this. You can see that indicated by the orientation of those black lines. They're very small, but they kind of show how the jet stream is flowing and the intensity of that jet stream. Let's go ahead and leave that black line on the screen and then overlap it here with this graphic. This is your low-level jet stream being indicated by the HRRR model, and you can see the orientation of these lines goes a little bit more like this, kind of curving a little bit more like this. These are winds more due south to north coming up into the low pressure system as you get closer to the surface and at the surface itself today. So as you go from the surface up, just several thousand feet, not tens of thousands of feet, but several thousands of feet into the atmosphere, winds are more due south to north, whereas that jet stream I was just showing further up, as a cloud would develop further and higher on up into the atmosphere, it would kind of get sheared, or it would get kind of the top of the cloud would start being blown in a different direction as a result of southwest to northeast winds there, when the winds at the surface are kind of trying to move the storm south to north. When you have that kind of swirling in the winds already going on in the atmosphere, that helps in elevating any tornado threats that do get together. And one other ingredient that you look at for tornadoes, of course, is going to be your dew points. This is basically kind of indicating the amount of moisture that we have for today's severe weather setup. And you can see how moisture is really going to develop in a very broad warm sector anywhere from the Mississippi Valley all the way on over into the Ohio Valley by the time we go deeper into the day and into the afternoon. Dew points in the 50s are plenty supportive for some severe weather. 60s are even better, especially for tornado potential. We're going to have mid to upper 60s over a lot of the highest risk zone that we see. Again, surrounding places like Memphis, Tennessee, and surrounding zones there. Paducah, Kentucky. Even on up into the Ohio Valley, though, at least dew points in the 50s, many spots getting into the 60s as well. So a very broad risk for, again, at least damaging winds and hail at this setup. At the very minimum, you need to be prepared for strong straight line winds that could be upwards of 60 to 80 miles per hour in some of these lines of storms that we see develop later today. The possibility of hail that could be upwards of 1 to 2 inches in diameter. But of course, there is that conditional possibility that we do see those stronger tornadoes all the way up to the Ohio Valley. We're going to have that potential for even more intense tornadoes, possibly back down into parts of the Mississippi Valley. And I want to go ahead and pivot on over now to future radar timing with the HRRR model, and we're going to go ahead and give you a look at what some of the latest short-range guidance is indicating may happen with some of the storms for the day today. Let's go ahead and get it pulled up on my end, and here we go. The model doing a great job initializing what's going on. As we pull up the timing, you can see that it's indicating that as of 8 a.m. this morning, by the way, the times on the top of the screen are in Eastern time as I play this out. So 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central time. Looking at storms lining up. I was just mentioning that we do have a tornado warning in parts of Missouri as of this time frame as I'm doing the stream this morning. There's your line of storms. It's doing a pretty good job initializing that line, and we're going to have to use the one run before to actually carry us through the rest of the day. You can see that as we continue to go through the morning and into the mid to late morning time frame, we're going to watch this line pushing east, and along it we're probably going to continue to watch some isolated tornado warnings maybe popping up. The most notable threat that's going to come out of this line as it persists east from eastern Oklahoma, northwest Arkansas, all the way up to the Iowa and Illinois border, though. Generally going to be some damaging winds and spots of hail. We could even see some hail that exceeds 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter in some isolated instances by the time we get through midday as this line continues surging to the east. St. Louis, Missouri, you could get impacted by some heavier storms with at the minimum isolated to scattered severe weather, especially a damaging wind and hail threat. Same will go up there towards Chicago with any of this activity. Wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado as it moves through around the midday as well. And we'll have to watch some of this activity all the way back down, continuing into eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas, as it could fuel up some possibilities of even an isolated tornado all the way back down there, maybe even into far northeastern Texas. Again, that's going to be sometime around 10, 11, 12 o'clock today. And then from there, there's some uncertainties in our general modeling. The HRRR model and the NAM model are in an unusual amount of disagreement into exactly how the setup is going to look, especially in terms of the future radar as we go beyond the middle of the day. But either way, I'm just going to use this guidance because it tends to be historically one of the more accurate short-range pieces of guidance. And you can definitely see here that it's looking like we're going to be watching storms all the way from northern Indiana back down to northeast Texas by the time we get to around 3 p.m. today. A sprawling setup, and it's this line where we're going to have mostly the damaging wind and hail potential. Wouldn't rule out some isolated tornadoes embedded in the line as it moves east. But what I want you to note is that the better chance for severe weather and the possibility of some tornadoes is likely going to run up and along ahead of the line. Look at this. By the time we go deeper through the afternoon into the evening, you can kind of see what I'm talking about on this particular piece of guidance. By around, say, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, I'd be getting prepared in parts of western Kentucky and Tennessee, because by then we might already have a few isolated cells firing on up. Any discrete or aka isolated supercell that we see through the afternoon into the evening hours of today will have that potential to produce intense tornadoes. So be on alert as we start the afternoon anyway, all the way from western Tennessee, all the way up to western Kentucky, and even along and ahead of any lines we have on up here through parts of Indiana, getting into Ohio. Look at this. This guidance is certainly indicating all the way on up here. This is why I extended the level 5 of 7 risk on my ONW severe scale. We could see some severe weather in the form and fashion of not just damaging winds and hail, but also the possibility of a couple of strong tornadoes if we can get some supercells ahead of whatever lines we have. This guidance is indicating a mess of some line segments as well as these more discrete cells up in the Ohio Valley and into parts of central Illinois, Indiana, as well as northern Ohio, parts of Detroit, Michigan. The Detroit, Michigan tornado risk would be pretty low in comparison to back down to the south. But definitely a sprawling severe weather setup, and that's why we have a level 3 to level 5 over a lot of these zones, including the Ohio Valley for later today. So be on the lookout. Louisville, Kentucky as well, maybe a discrete supercell there sometime as we go through the afternoon into the evening. And again, that threat will really continue to ramp on up back down to the southwest of there. And this is why I have the level 6 of 7 anywhere from parts of far southern parts of Arkansas, stretching on up here right along the Mississippi River Valley and into places like Paducah, Kentucky. As the line that is left over from this morning continues to kind of regain intensity, probably producing a lot of damaging winds and hail if this guidance holds for what's going to be happening as we go deeper through the afternoon. Again, this isn't a guarantee, it's just a general look that the line should look somewhat like this, say around 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock into the evening. And then out ahead on the leading edge of said line, we're going to have that potential for some of those supercell storms to continue. And there's going to be several hours. I mean, we could see a few supercells all the way through the early to mid-afternoon in parts of western Kentucky and Tennessee. Better chance as we go through the evening. Look at this. All the way back down here to southern Arkansas, looking at some cells developing around and on the leading edge of the line that are a little bit more isolated in nature. That's where we could have the strong tornado potential. Same deal with these storms that could, line up anywhere from Jackson and Henderson in Tennessee all the way back to points west closer to the line. Keep in mind, especially with exact supercells like this, the model isn't going to be perfect. So this little supercell that you see right here near Jackson and Henderson there in Tennessee, that could be a little bit further west, closer to Memphis. You need to be prepared in any of those zones that I highlighted in the brighter colors just a minute ago. All the way through the middle to the back half of this evening, we'll still have that potential, I think, for at least a strong tornado in isolated fashion all the way here into western Ohio, leading up to any of the lines that may be moving in from the west or the single line based on what this model's showing. I do think by the time we go deeper through the evening, while we continue to watch a tornado threat that looks very intense on the leading edge of our line, back down here from southern Arkansas, stretching on up into west central parts of Tennessee and points in between, we're going to see more of a damaging wind threat evolving over a lot of this zone as we continue to watch the line pushing east. By the middle of the night tonight, let's just say anywhere from Cleveland, Ohio, back down to Columbus, Cincinnati, Louisville. I mean, this is lining up with a lot of the big cities. Bowling Green, Kentucky, back down to the southeast side of Memphis. Probably watching a damaging wind line at this point with some hail as well. Still possibly the further south you go, especially along this line, better chance for some notches in the line where we could continue to see elevated tornado potential. We could even see some supercells out ahead of the line that create even higher tornado potential even as we go deeper through the night tonight. Again, just to rehash today's severe weather risk and the intensity of the possible hazards that we could see, here's another look at my ONW severe scale. I based this off the Storm Prediction Center's graphics, so whenever I see them upgrading risks, I tend to try and upgrade the risks. But I normally do it in a little bit more of a specified zone to where I'm seeing the highest hazards, and I think that more of Arkansas could also have that higher risk in comparison to what the Storm Prediction Center has shown, at least so far as of this morning, on their severe weather risk graphics. So level 6 of 7 on my ONW severe scale, not the highest end potential that I've ever seen necessarily, but definitely a high-end tornado outbreak with intense tornadoes of EF3 plus possible, and that's enough to warrant that level 6 of 7 because we're already going to have damaging winds and hail at the minimum as threats in places like eastern Arkansas, getting up into western Tennessee, western Kentucky. Again, that will include places like Pine Bluff, Arkansas, as you exit El Dorado and Monticello there in Arkansas, stretching on up through Memphis, Tennessee, near Jonesboro and Osceola there in Arkansas as well, Covington, Tennessee, Humboldt, Union City, Mayfield, Kentucky, an infamous tornado there just a few years ago, of course, Paducah, Kentucky, even getting on up towards places like Sykeston and Cape Girardeau there in Missouri, Carbondale, Illinois, points in between. That's where that highest risk for some of those discrete storms right out ahead of that line may be as we go deeper through the day today. Something that needs to be watched very closely. Again, though, I have that level 5 of 7 going all the way on up here, and I might even extend it more. Stay tuned to my community tab of my channel for updates. Level 5 of 7 extends all the way on up into parts of the Ohio Valley, so we could definitely see at least some strong tornado potential all the way on up into places like Indiana and Ohio. I just realized I turned my pin on. It hasn't been on this whole time, but that's okay. But yeah, it looks like a very feisty setup for today. And I do want to thank Brenda down in the live chat as I'm doing this live here on our Wednesday morning for the $5 donation. Donations are greatly appreciated from everyone. Brenda has been a member now for almost a month, and I've gotten some donations from her in the past. So thank you very much to Brenda for the support. Let me know if you have any questions there. I'll answer some other questions that we have here as well as I'm doing this live. I'm planning for the worst, Girl Dev says. Well, it's good to be prepared for the worst, but remember, there's no need to panic in a situation like this. Again, we do have a level 4 to level 5 of 7 all the way up to Indiana. That does mean there is that potential for strong tornadoes, but there's no need to be scared. Of course, that will not change the outcome of what is set to occur. Tim says, I think the shear is just crazy. Any storms that develop or move into that shear will spin. Yeah, it's just a matter of exactly how many of the discrete cells we actually see ahead of our possible line segments today. That's what's really going to kind of be the factor that decides whether we see this be an all-out tornado outbreak or not. Based on current guidance, I looked at it and I wasn't going to necessarily just upgrade it because the Storm Prediction Center upgraded the risk. But I definitely see, in comparison to last night's update, I see some discrete cells all the way on up here into the Ohio Valley this afternoon and evening being possible. I see them being possible back down here into Tennessee and parts of Arkansas more as well. The line itself could also have, embedded QLCS or kind of embedded tornado potentials as well. All those, ingredients coming together, and this future radar really indicating now more the discrete activity. That's enough for me to pull the trigger. And even if the 6 of 7 doesn't end up fully panning out, it's better for it to not pan out and everybody be prepared than people be underprepared and then it pan out. So that's the way I see it. Chad Duncan says the wind has already picked up in north central Arkansas. Yeah, that's a good point. We actually have the potential for very gusty winds along with this setup as we go through the day today. It is certainly looking like widespread gusts from the south to the north as that lower level jet stream and surface jet kind of are kicking up, so to speak, as we go through the day today. Here's a look at those forecasted winds as of midday today. The winds will only continue to pick up in a place like north central Arkansas through the day with 40-mile-per-hour gusts at the minimum expected as we go through around 2 o'clock. Gusts will continue to be high over especially the Mississippi Valley and points closer to the Ohio Valley through at least mid to late afternoon today. Logan says, what do you think about southeastern Wisconsin's threat? Yeah, let's go ahead and give you a look at that again. Looking at the ONW severe scale for the day today, you can see that we do have a level 3 to level 4 of 7 there on the southeastern side of Wisconsin. I did have a live update last night on our Tuesday night that I may end up archiving. I talked about that threat for a possibly conditional second round of storms after what we're seeing in some zones around Wisconsin this morning as we go deeper through the day today. I think that's generally more unlikely to be severe anyway. So here's a look at the future radar up there in Wisconsin. Again, if anybody has questions about their local area, please drop them down in the live chat if you're with me on live. If you're watching after, drop it down in the comments section below. But looking at Wisconsin, of course, storms possible as we get through the middle part of the day today. Madison, Janesville, Milwaukee, Kenosha, these areas possibly getting some heavier storms anywhere from around now all the way through the rest of the mid to late morning. And we could see, especially with that mid to late morning line into the early afternoon, the possibility of some damaging winds or spotty hail as this, we watch this head on in. From there, it looks like we may see a conditional threat for a couple extra cells that could produce severe weather potential, especially in the form of damaging winds or an isolated tornado. You can see that maybe anywhere from Wisconsin back down to the Chicago region this afternoon. But generally, I do think the worst threats continue to look like they are now down to your southeast. And a secondary, more widespread conditional round that was being indicated kind of along this boundary yesterday does not look as likely. But still, be aware. Let's see, Anna Brown says it's raining really bad in Chicago right now. Yeah, that's no surprise as we've got those storms moving in this morning. Heavy rain expected for a couple more hours. We might get a brief break, then more storms move in, and those could produce additional severe weather as we get through early to mid-afternoon, especially in the form of damaging winds and hail being possibilities. If everybody can hold up for just a second, I'm going to actually go ahead and pivot on over now. I want to look on my own end at what the Storm Prediction Center is showing with their latest severe weather risk graphic for today, if they've issued that yet. And they have not just yet. I think they do issue it sometime around, it'll be another 30 minutes or so before they issue that, my bad. But again, here's the latest look at the ONW severe scale, again, at least a level 5 to 6 of 7 on the scale over a lot of the Mississippi Valley and Ohio Valley for today. Brenda says, your information has been an immense help for my family. We have a lot of thunder and heavy rain already here in Lima, Ohio. Yeah, let me go ahead and give you a little bit more of a detailed update for the Lima area while we're at it. And if anybody else has additional questions, drop those down below. Looking at the timing of storms today in a place like Lima, Ohio, that's right up in the northwestern part of the state, right there. You can see that we're going to have, this activity this morning moving on through. Damaging winds and hail possible. Most of this just looks to be elevated type thunderstorm activity, not surface based, and that's just some heavy rain and storms moving on through with less of a severe risk. Whatever we get later today, starting mid-afternoon and after, has a better chance of being severe. So be on the lookout starting, I'd say, around 3 o'clock at the earliest. Better chance as we go deeper through the afternoon and into the evening for possibly some mixed convection, meaning we could have a line, we could have some more isolated activity out ahead of that line as well. And again, any of these isolated cells that we do end up possibly seeing, they will have that potential for a strong tornado or two, and that could extend, especially into places southwest of Lima, but even all the way on up there towards Lima, Ohio, some point through the mid to late afternoon into the evening. So, especially as we get beyond mid-afternoon and closer to the late afternoon and then eventually sundown time frame, that's when it looks like the tornado risk will peak. And then from there, we might continue to watch heavy rain and storms moving through, at least through the middle of the night tonight. And you'll be probably hearing thunder for hours as this line slows down this evening, and is going to probably be producing widespread flooding as well as it begins to eventually kind of shift down to the south and east and then start stalling out. If I give you a look at the future radar beyond, say, the middle of the night tonight, you're going to notice what happens. Look at how this line is set to kind of get past the Ohio Valley and Mississippi Valley. Let's get it going. And then once it gets past there, it kind of sinks and then just kind of stalls over the same areas. And parts of Kentucky and Tennessee are going to deal with another severe weather threat into tomorrow. Look at that. As we go into our Thursday, more severe weather possible from Little Rock over to Memphis. Unfortunately, if we get a bunch of strong tornadoes today, then this will just be like a deja vu setup, and it will just be more harm to the wounded, so to speak. We'll also get a severe weather risk in these zones again by Saturday. Storms will also be training, and that could lead to very intense amounts of rainfall. If we look at the total precipitation, I mean, we're looking at the possibility of some parts here of Kentucky, Tennessee, northeastern Arkansas getting 6+ inches of rain, all said and done. But with that being said, that is the conclusion for this morning's live update. I appreciate everybody for tuning in and the few people who have asked questions down in the live chat. If you have any further questions, drop them below in the comments section after this stream has ended. Make sure you're hitting that like button on the way out if you haven't hit the like button already, because it really helps support this channel and get this, update out into the algorithm to people who missed it while I was actually live. But with that being said, thank you to everybody who has tuned in, and I am going to go ahead and put it on the update starting screen, but we're actually ending the update.